I know no one will believe this. And, to be honest, I wouldn't believe it either if I hadn't heard it with my own ears. This isn't a story about voices or monsters. It's about time, about something that started to anticipate me. My name is Caleb Mercer. I lived alone for almost 5 years on a property near Kaibito in northern Arizona. I recorded everything. It was an old habit. I'd leave a recorder running while I worked in the shed, switching tapes every couple of days. I used to say it helped me keep pace, like a spoken diary. But in December 1998, I started to notice something on the recordings. Small differences. A creak of wood, the sound of the chair dragging, the click of the light switch. It all came before. Sometimes half a second before, sometimes more. It was as if the tape had recorded the future, or as if someone was living my gestures just seconds before me. At first, I thought it was a synchronization failure, interference in the tape head, but the more I tried to prove it, was a technical flaw, the more personal it got. Until one of the tapes recorded my own voice, breathing, before I even spoke. I still have that tape, or rather, it still plays, but what you hear at the end is no longer my breathing. I had been living alone for almost 5 years on that property in Kaibito. The land was dry, flat, full of reddish rocks and low shrubs that the wind made dance all day. The house was small, 2 rooms and a shed, with an old radio tower I never got around to, dismantling. It was about 5 miles from the main road, enough for the sound of cars to never reach. My day always started the same. Black coffee, checking the generator, and then a few hours in the shed, tinkering with old transmitter parts. I recorded everything on cassette tape, the sound of the wind, of screws dropping, of my own breathing. It was a habit that started out of boredom and ended up becoming company. The sound of the tape spinning gave me the feeling that someone else was there, with me, listening. The tapes were organized by date and time, stacked in a toolbox. I'd change the tape every 2 days, and at night I'd listen to what had been recorded. It was almost always the same, background noise, the hiss of the wind, sometimes the distant sound of a coyote. It was comforting in a strange way. The nearest town was almost a 40-minute drive. I only went there twice a month for supplies, fuel, and cigarettes. Other than that, it was just me, the silent radio, and the quiet. Over time, I learned to recognize everything by sound, the creak of each beam, the rhythm of the wind passing over the roof, the dripping of the plumbing at night. Anything outside that pattern caught my attention immediately. The first thing out of place was small, a creak in the hallway that didn't match my movement. I was sitting on the bed, pulling on my boots, and I heard the sound of the wood bending, as if someone had taken a step a second before me. I thought I'd imagined it, but on the tape, when I listened the next day, the creak really did come before, 3 seconds before to be exact. After that, I started testing. I'd leave the recorder on the table and time my actions, opening the door, pulling the chair, turning off the light. And every time, the sound happened before. Sometimes half a second, sometimes 2, sometimes more. At first I laughed. I thought it was some kind of mechanical failure, something simple. Demagnetization of the tape, electrostatic, interference, anything like that. But the more I listened, the more the feeling grew. This wasn't an error. It was someone. And whoever it was, they were starting to understand my rhythm. I spent a whole week trying to prove the error was technical. I got the tapes, the stopwatch, the old oscilloscope, and started testing everything. I measured the rotation speed, changed the batteries, cleaned the head with isopropyl alcohol. Nothing. The delay, or rather the advance, was still there. A drawer, opening 2 seconds before I touched it. The chair dragging before I stood up. The sound of the glass on the sink before my hand touched the glass. It was always before, never after. On the 3rd night of testing, I left the recorder running with the microphone pointed at the kitchen window. I went to sleep around 11, and the wind was strong. When I listened to the tape in the morning, I noticed something that made no sense. The sounds of the wind came at perfect, almost mathematical, intervals, as if someone outside was imitating the wind, blowing with the same rhythm, but at a slightly advanced time. From that point on, I started marking everything in a notebook: date, time difference between the sound and the actual event. The intervals were shrinking: 4 seconds, then 3, 2, 1.5. It seemed like the error was learning to keep up with me. One morning, the recorder captured something that wasn't the sound of wood, or wind, or interference. It was breathing, heavy, close, slow. At first, I thought it was mine, but the microphone was in the shed, and I was sleeping in the house. And the strangest part, the breathing started before the shed door creaked, before any footstep, as if the thing was waiting for me. The next morning, I found marks on the ground near the side gate. They were footprints, or rather, they looked like footprints, but the shape made no sense. Long, narrow, with the heel dug in deep and the front part almost light, as if the thing didn't need momentum to walk. The first instinct was to think coyotes, but there was something different. The steps seemed ordered, too aligned, as if whoever walked there was aware of what they were doing. That night, I left the microphone on again, but this time with 2 tapes, one in the shed, one inside the house. And when I compared the recordings the next day, I realized what I had been trying to deny until then. The sound from the shed came 2 seconds before the sound from the house, and the two together traced what seemed to be the exact path of a person crossing the property, coming toward me. After the footprints, I stopped sleeping right. It wasn't fear in the usual sense, it was a tension that wouldn't let me rest. I would lie there listening to the recorder spinning in the dark, the soft click of the tape passing, and every creak in the house seemed like a signal, a coded message. The following week, the advances became so precise they stopped being errors. It was as if something knew exactly what I was going to do and did it first. If I got out of bed, the chair in the kitchen would creak a second before. If I closed the cabinet, the sound of the latch would come slightly early, even with the door still open. I started talking aloud to mark the time, to see if the sound would follow me. Now, I'd say, and wait for the noise, but sometimes the tape showed the opposite. My voice came after the now. On one particular night, the wind was calm. I left the windows open and sat in the dark, listening. The recorder was running, and everything seemed normal until I heard the sound of my own footstep coming from the hallway. 1, 2, before I moved. I stayed motionless, trying to figure out if it was an echo, but an echo comes after, and this came before. I went to the kitchen with the flashlight and felt the floor was slightly cold, as if someone had just passed through. No sign of a draft, no open window, just that faint smell which I couldn't name at the time, a mixture of wet earth and rust. In the recordings from that night, the sound changes. It's not just noise anymore. There's a cadence, a rhythm that seems human. Footsteps, breathing, the click of the switch, the chair being pulled. Everything happens in perfect time, but without me. It's as if the house had learned to live on its own, repeating my routine a few seconds in advance. One morning, I woke up to the sound of the shed door opening. I ran out there with the flashlight. Nothing. But the recorder in the shed was on, and when I rewound the tape, I heard my own voice calling, "Is anyone there?" Before I had said it, it was my voice, but without the tremor, without the breathlessness, without the hesitation. As if the thing knew what I was going to say and was rehearsing for me. After that, I started to realize the sound wasn't just coming from the tapes anymore. It was coming from the walls, the metal, the well water. Everything started to respond before. And every day, the interval shrank. The rational part of me still thought it could all be explained. Maybe it was interference from the generator, ground vibrations, static discharge in the microphones. I spent 3 nights setting up an experiment to prove it. I installed 2 identical recorders, one inside the house and one 20 yards away in the shed. I left a metronome playing between them, beating exact time. The idea was simple. If the sound was in advance, I would see the difference on the tapes. When I listened to the recordings the next day, the metronome was perfect. Tick-tock, tick-tock. But along with it, there was another sound, a low, irregular sound. At first, I thought it was the generator's engine, but then I realized it was my heartbeat, my breathing too. They were there, audible, but, as always, before. I spent days repeating the test, changing the times, the environments, even turning everything off. Even with no power, even with the shed closed, the tape recorded those intimate sounds, the exact tempo of my breathing, the sound of blood in my ears, but advanced by fractions that were getting smaller and smaller. It was as if, whatever it was studying me from the inside, learning my natural rhythm. I started to notice the same pattern outside the recordings, the click of the light switch coinciding with the moment I thought about turning on the light, the radio static appearing before I turned the knob. One night, while messing with my tools, I heard the sound of the wrench hitting the floor, and 3 seconds later, it fell. The sound arrived first. The world seemed to be following me with a delay, as if reality was reacting to something that had already happened somewhere else. In my notebook, I wrote, "Maybe it's not getting ahead. Maybe I'm the one who's late." That same week, the voices started on the radio. Not words, but rhythmic breaths and clicks like a code trying to form. I recognized the pattern. Heartbeats. The same interval as my own heart, only in static. That's when I understood it wasn't a glitch, it was a call. Someone or something was trying to get into the same time as me. The first day, everything synchronized. It was too quiet. No wind, no radio hiss, just the exact sound of things happening when they should. No delay, no advance. And yet, everything felt wrong, as if I had lost something invisible in the interval that had vanished. I realized it when I tried to record again. The metronome marked the time, the tape spun, and the sound that used to come before now came with no difference. But when I compared the 2 recordings, house and shed, I heard a detail that froze my blood. A third track, low, almost imperceptible, a continuous breath that wasn't mine. It ran through both recordings at the same time, as if the thing was between the places. That night, I left the light on and sat in the chair near the window. Outside, the desert seemed motionless, just the radio, tower silhouetted against the sky. And that's when I noticed the reflection in the glass. I blinked, and the reflection blinked a little after. Late, as if what was there was my trail trying to catch up. I kept watching until I couldn't breathe right, and when I stood up, the reflection stood up first. I left the house and went to the shed, trying to prove to myself it was a hallucination. But as soon as I opened the door, the smell of wet earth and rust hit me. The same smell I'd sensed weeks before. And inside, the sound of the recorder running on its own, tape spinning in the dark. I put my ear close and heard my own voice saying, "Stay there." I don't remember saying that. I rewound the tape and listened again. "Stay there." The second time it came as a chorus, a voice alongside mine, deep, damp, drawn out. I turned off the recorder, but the sound continued. No tape, no power. The sound echoed through the metal of the shed, and the voice repeated in an almost patient tone, "Stay there." I looked out the window and saw a shadow pass between the house and the tower. The body moved with my same gait, same height, same posture. But when it stopped, I was still walking. It was in that moment I realized the thing wasn't before me anymore. It was in my place. The next morning, I did what anyone would do. I got the car, threw some things in a backpack, and decided to hit the road. I didn't take the tapes. I didn't want to hear anything anymore. I just wanted the ordinary noise of things. Engine, wind, tires on gravel. But even those sounds seemed wrong, as if their timing was out of phase. The road to Page is long and almost always empty. I drove for about 20 minutes before I realized the car's dashboard was silent. No engine noise, no rattling. I looked out the window and saw the road dust kicking up before the wheels passed over it. It was the same pattern, only now it was outside the house. The whole world was ahead. I stopped the car. The wind didn't come. The silence was so deep I could hear the blood in my ears. Then I heard it, faint but present, the sound of footsteps approaching, my footsteps. From inside the car, I heard the exact sound of my boot hitting the ground outside. 1, 2, 3. Then the handle moved on its own, slowly, as if a version of me was on the other side, trying to open it. I ran. I left the car there and climbed up through the desert, toward the distant towers. The sun was beginning to rise and the heat came in waves. But what accompanied me wasn't a shadow or a sound. It was synchrony. Every breath I took had another one attached, perfectly, like an echo stuck to the skin. I reached the radio tower. I climbed the rungs to the top, the wind cutting my hands, the metal vibrating under my feet. From up there, I saw my entire property, the house, the shed, the car, stopped on the road. And down below, near the gate, was me. Same clothes, same posture, looking up. Only his movement came before mine. When I raised my arm, his arm was already up. When I took a deep breath, he had already breathed. I think that's when I understood what was happening. It wasn't the sound that was advancing, it was time, and it was swapping me out, piece by piece, breath by breath. With every second, I became a little more copy and a little less original. I climbed down from the tower before the thing reached me. I ran back to the house and grabbed the last tape I recorded that morning. When I pressed play, I heard my voice saying, "If you're hearing this, then I'm already gone." It was the only time the tape and the present met, and since then, I'm no longer sure which side of the sound I ended up on. I'm recording this on Sunday morning. I think it's Sunday. The clock stopped last night, and the sun seems to rise faster than it should. The generator is off. The house is cold, but it still smells like metal and wet earth. I don't hear the advance anymore. Everything seems normal now. Sounds happen when they're supposed to. Things respond at the right time. But that's the problem. The silence that comes after. It's the kind of silence that seems to be waiting for an answer. The tapes are all here, stacked in the corner of the room. Sometimes they play on their own. They don't make the noise of old tape, there's no hiss. They just breathe. And when the tape ends, I always hear that little click. The same one from when I used to stop the recorder. But now the click comes before I touch the button. Maybe that's how it happens. The thing doesn't kill, it just takes your place and lets the rest continue talking, recording, trying to explain. If anyone finds this, listen carefully. When you get to the end of the tape, listen to the last second before the silence. You'll hear me breathe, but if the breath comes before the sound, then it's not me who's talking. If you want to know what happened to me, rewind. I always come back before. If this story chilled you, share it and subscribe to the channel. Maybe someone else needs to hear it before the sound reaches them.